Ambassador Velik Sorin stood alone in the center of the War Council chamber. His crystalline body flickered between shades of blue and violet, sign of deep distress that any member of his species would recognize immediately. Around him, the massive, beetle-like forms of the Threskin commanders sat in their stone seats. Watching him with expressions that mixed boredom with contempt, he had been speaking for 3 hours. His voice had grown hoarse. His arguments had grown desperate. And still not a single Threscan showed any sign of listening. "You cannot invade Earth," Velik said again, his light pulsing with urgency. "I am begging you to understand. This is not caution. This is not cowardice. This is a warning based on centuries of observation. The Galactic Concord has watched humanity since they first discovered fire. We know what they are capable of. You do not." High War Master Draketh shifted in his throne, his massive armored body creaking like ancient machinery. He was the supreme commander of all Threskin military forces, a warrior who had personally led the conquest of 17 worlds. His carapace bore the scars of 100 battles, and his eyes held the cold confidence of someone who had never known true defeat. Ambassador Draketh said, his voice grinding like stones crushing bone, "You have shown us your evidence. You have made your arguments, and you have wasted enough of our time. Please," Velik said, "just look at what I'm showing you." He activated the holographic projector built into his crystalline arm. Images filled the air above the council chamber. Humans at war with each other. Humans fighting in trenches filled with mud and poison gas. Humans charging into machine gun fire. Humans dropping nuclear weapons on their own cities. "They split the atom," Velik said, his voice barely above a whisper. "They discovered one of the most powerful forces in the universe. And the first thing they did with this knowledge was build weapons. The second thing they did was use those weapons on themselves. And the third thing they did was build more of them." The holographic images shifted, mushroom clouds rising over burning cities. Radiation spreading across landscapes. And then, impossibly, humans returning to those same landscapes, building new cities, having children, continuing their civilization as if nothing had happened. "Any other species would have destroyed themselves," Velik continued. "The Kirishi calculated a 97% probability of human extinction within 50 years of their nuclear discovery. The Velthri gave them even worse odds. But humans did not destroy themselves. They came to the edge of annihilation, looked over the cliff, and simply stepped back." Draketh laughed. It was an ugly sound, wet and grinding. "You show me a species that cannot even control its own violent impulses, and you expect me to be afraid. They are savages, Ambassador. Primitive creatures still playing with fire and sharp sticks." "They are not primitive," Velik said, and now his voice carried an edge of anger. "They are restrained. There is a difference that you are too arrogant to see." The chamber went silent. No one spoke to the High War Master that way. Not ambassadors. Not other War Masters. Not even the Threskin Emperor himself. Draketh rose from his throne. He stood nearly 3 meters tall, his armored body blocking out the light from the chamber's windows. When he spoke, his voice was soft and dangerous. "Explain." Velik knew he was risking his life, but he also knew that millions of lives depended on what he said next. He chose his words carefully. "The humans have had the power to destroy themselves for over a century. They have not done so. This is not because they are peaceful. They are one of the most violent species the Concord has ever observed. They fight constantly. They kill each other over resources. Over ideology, over religion, over simple hatred." He paused, letting his words sink in. "But when they face a true existential threat, something that endangers their entire species, they stop fighting each other. They unite. And when humans unite, War Master, they become something else entirely. Something that even the Concord fears." Draketh stared at him for a long moment. Then he turned to his advisors and generals, sweeping his massive claw in a gesture of dismissal. "The Galactic Concord has grown soft," he announced. "They see a primitive world, and they tremble. They watch humans kill each other with crude weapons, and they imagine that this somehow makes them dangerous to us." He turned back to Velik, and his eyes held nothing but contempt. The Threskin Empire has conquered 47 species across 6 spiral arms of this galaxy. We have crushed civilizations that wielded technologies far beyond what humans possess. We have broken species that were united for millennia. His voice rose until it echoed off the chamber walls. One divided world of primitives will not stop us. They will kneel within a solar cycle, or they will burn. There is no third option. Velik's crystalline form dimmed to a deep, mournful violet. He had played his final card, and it had not been enough. The Threscon were too proud, too confident, too convinced of their own invincibility. They looked at human history and saw chaos and violence. They did not see what Velik saw, a species that had been forged in fire and had somehow emerged stronger for it. The Concord formally protests this invasion, Velik said, his voice flat and tired. We will not support it. We will not participate in it. And we will not be held responsible for its consequences. Dracoth waved his claw dismissively. Your protest is noted, Ambassador. Now leave. The invasion fleet launches at dawn. Velik walked out of the chamber slowly, his light flickering with every step. Behind him, he could hear the Threskin commanders laughing. Already dividing up the resources they expected to claim from their new conquest? Outside, his assistant was waiting. A young Qurayshi diplomat, her feathers ruffled with anxiety. What did they say? She asked. They said no, Velik replied. 200 warships will reach Earth in 3 standard weeks. The Qurayshi's eyes widened. What do we do? Velik was silent for a long moment. Then he opened a private communication channel to the Concord's observation post near Earth's moon. Begin recording everything, he transmitted. Document every battle, every death, every moment of what is about to happen. The galaxy will need to learn from this. One way or another, this invasion will change everything. He closed the channel and turned to his assistant. We watch, he said quietly. We wait. And we pray that I am wrong about what the humans will do when they realize they are not alone in the universe. But deep in his crystalline heart, Velik knew he was not wrong. He had spent decades studying humanity. He had watched them survive ice ages and plagues and wars that should have ended their civilization. He had seen them claw their way back. From the edge of extinction again and again, the Threskin thought. They were going to conquer a primitive world. They had no idea what. They were about to awaken. The Threskin fleet emerged from hyperspace like a swarm of metal locusts. 200 warships, each one larger than anything humanity had ever built, arranged themselves in perfect formation around the small blue planet called Earth. Their weapons systems hummed with power. Their soldiers stood ready in their drop pods. Their commanders watched the planet below with hungry eyes. Ground Commander Veth stood on the bridge of the flagship, studying the world he had been sent to conquer. It looked peaceful from up here. Clouds drifted across blue oceans. City lights sparkled on the night side. Primitive satellites orbited in clumsy, inefficient patterns. Begin the broadcast, Veth ordered. The Threskin communication officers activated every frequency they could detect. Radio waves, television signals, military channels, civilian networks. They flooded them all with a single message. Translated into every human language, their computers had been able to analyze. The message was simple. Surrender unconditionally, or face extinction. Veth expected panic. He expected governments to collapse. He expected humans to flood into the streets, screaming and crying, begging their leaders to save them. Instead, he got silence. 17 minutes later, a response came. It was broadcast from a military installation in a region the humans called North America. The voice was calm, almost bored. Who the hell are you, and why are you blocking our satellite TV? Veth stared at the communication screen in disbelief. His officers exchanged confused glances. This was not how conquered species were supposed to respond. They do not understand their situation, one of his advisors suggested. They think this is some kind of joke. Veth nodded slowly. Then we will educate them. He ordered a demonstration strike. One cruiser would descend and destroy a human city. Not a large city, not a capital. just a small settlement on the coast of a large island continent the humans called Australia. The destruction would be broadcast worldwide. The humans would see what Threskin weapons could do to their primitive structures, then they would surrender. The cruiser Inevitable Dominion broke formation and began its descent toward Earth. It was a beautiful ship, sleek and deadly. Carrying enough firepower to level a dozen human cities, its commander, a veteran named Thrak, watched the target city grow larger on his view screen. He never saw the missiles coming. 8 minutes. That was how long it took for the humans to respond. 8 minutes from the moment the Inevitable Dominion entered Earth's atmosphere to the moment it disappeared in a ball of atomic fire. The nuclear warheads had come from 3 different countries: the United States, Russia, China, nations that, according to Threscon, intelligence had spent decades pointing those same weapons at each other. Nations that had threatened mutual destruction over ideology and territory and pride, and yet, when an alien ship descended toward a country that was allied with none of them, they had united instantly. They had redirected their weapons skyward. They had coordinated their attack in minutes. Veth watched the destruction of the Inevitable Dominion in stunned silence. Around him, his officers were shouting, demanding explanations, calling for immediate retaliation. But Veth could not speak. He could only stare at the expanding cloud of debris that had once been one of his best ships. How? He finally managed. How did they coordinate so quickly? No one had an answer. Veth straightened his armored shoulders and forced his voice to remain calm. Increase bombardment. They cannot intercept everything. Begin landing operations in all major population centers. The Threskin fleet opened fire. For the next 6 hours, Earth burned. Cities that humans had built over centuries were reduced to rubble in minutes. Millions died in the initial strikes. Millions more fled into the countryside, into the mountains, into anywhere that offered shelter from the fire falling from the sky. But the humans did not surrender. Instead, they fought. Fighter jets that had no business challenging spacecraft flew suicide missions into landing craft. Pilots who knew they were going to die aimed their planes at Threskin drop pods and took as many enemies with them as they could. Naval vessels fired anti-aircraft missiles at targets in low orbit, their crews fully aware that they were drawing attention to themselves. That retaliation would be swift and terrible. They did it anyway. By dawn, Threskin ground forces had landed in 12 major cities across the planet. They expected token resistance. They expected frightened civilians hiding in basements. They expected easy victory. What they found was hell in Moscow. Human soldiers collapsed buildings onto advancing Threscon units, then climbed into the rubble to fight hand-to-hand. Their weapons could barely scratch Threskin armor, so they found other ways. They jammed explosives into gaps in the carapace. They poured burning fuel into ventilation slits. They died by the hundreds, and they kept coming. In Lagos, a city of millions, the civilian population organized itself into guerrilla units within hours. They knew their streets. They knew their buildings. They turned every alley into an ambush point, every rooftop into a sniper nest. The Threskin had better weapons, better armor, better training, but they did not know which door hid a bomb and which door hid a family trying to escape. In Snow Paulo, a retired engineer figured out the frequency of Threscon communication networks. He could not jam them completely, but he could disrupt them. So he broadcast music. Loud, angry human music with screaming vocals and pounding drums. The Threskin had never heard anything like it. Their commanders could not coordinate. Their soldiers could not receive orders, and while they were confused, the humans attacked by noon of the first day. The Threskin had lost control of 9 of the 12 cities they had invaded. Their soldiers were dying at rates that should have been impossible. Their equipment was being destroyed by weapons that should not have been able to touch it. Commander. Veth received a report from the front lines. A Threskin captain, his voice trembling with something that sounded terrifyingly like fear. They are not fighting like a conquered species, the captain said. They are fighting like they have already won. Like our victory is impossible. Like we are the ones who should be afraid. Beth ended the transmission without responding. He walked to the view screen and stared down at the burning planet below. Somewhere in those flames, in those ruined cities, in those desperate battles, humans were dying by the millions. His forces were winning by every conventional measure. They controlled the orbit. They controlled the skies. They controlled the major population centers, and yet Veth could not shake the feeling that he had made a terrible mistake. That the humans were not fighting to win. That they were fighting to send a message: we will not surrender. We will not kneel. You can kill us all, but you will never conquer us. For the first time in his long military career, Commander Veth felt something cold settle in his chest. It took him a moment to recognize the feeling. It was doubt, Ambassador. Velek Soren had not slept in 3 weeks. His crystalline body had dimmed to a pale, exhausted gray, and his light flickered with irregular pulses that worried his staff. But he refused to rest. He refused to look away from the screens that covered every wall of the Concord observation post. Earth was dying. That was the simple truth that the data showed. Human casualties had passed 100 million. Their cities were rubble. Their infrastructure was collapsing. Their military forces were being ground down hour by hour, day by day. And yet Vali watched a group of human soldiers in the ruins of a city called Berlin. They were surrounded. They had run out of ammunition hours ago. They had no hope of rescue, no chance of victory, no possibility of survival. They were still fighting. One of them had found a piece of Threskin armor from a fallen enemy. She had strapped it to her arm like a shield. Another had sharpened a piece of rebar into a crude spear. A third was throwing chunks of concrete at the advancing Threskin soldiers. Buying seconds of time for his companions, they killed 3 Threskin before they died. 3 armored warriors, each worth 10 human soldiers, brought down by desperate people fighting with broken metal and rocks. Why did they not surrender? Velek's assistant asked. The young Kirashi had been watching the footage with him, her feathers flat against her body in a constant display of distress. The outcome is certain. They cannot win. Why do they continue? Velek was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft, because they are not fighting to win. Then what are they fighting for? They are fighting to make victory cost something. Velek turned to face his assistant, his crystalline form pulsing with a complex mixture of horror and respect. They want the Threskin to bleed for every inch of their world. They want every Threskin soldier to remember the faces of the humans who tried to kill them. They want the Threskin to understand that conquering Earth was not worth the price. The Kirasi's feathers ruffled in confusion. But that is illogical. If defeat is certain, negotiation is the rational choice. They could save millions of lives by simply accepting the inevitable. Humans do not think that way. Velek returned his gaze to the screens. To them, some things are more important than survival. Freedom, dignity, the right to decide their own fate. They would rather die fighting than live as slaves. On the screens, the battle for Berlin ended. The last human soldier fell, still swinging her improvised weapon. The Threskin moved on, and somewhere else on the planet. A new battle began. In a city called New York, a Threskin commander named Korath had taken a different approach. He had gathered human prisoners, thousands of them, and broadcast his ultimatum across the region. Surrender your weapons. Surrender your fighters, or these captives will die. It was a tactic that had worked on dozens of other species. The threat to helpless civilians usually broke even the most. Determined resistance. Korath was not prepared for humanity's response. The humans did not surrender. They attacked harder. Their remaining military forces in the region threw themselves at the Threskin positions with renewed fury. Their fighters flew suicide missions. Their soldiers charged into certain death. Their communications channels filled with a single message, repeated in every language and every voice. Every Threskin who harms a prisoner will be hunted. We will find you. We will remember your face. And no matter how long it takes, no matter where you run, we will make you answer for what you have done. Korath was a veteran of 15 conquest campaigns. He had faced fanatics before. He had faced desperate species making their last stand. But he had never heard anything like the cold promise in those transmissions. He released the prisoners. The humans attacked anyway. When Korath demanded an explanation, the human commander who had led the assault responded with a message that would be remembered for centuries. You thought taking hostages would make us weak? You were wrong. It made us angry, and you do not want to see what we do when we are angry. Korath survived the battle, barely. He spent the rest of his life telling other Threskin about what he had seen, about the look in human eyes when they charged positions they could not possibly take, about the way they fought even when wounded, even when dying, even when victory was impossible, about the way they made him afraid. The weeks passed. The Threskin continued to win by every conventional measure. They controlled Earth's orbit. They controlled the skies. They held 60% of the major population centers, but they controlled nothing else. The humans had adapted. They had learned to hide. They had learned to strike and disappear. They had learned to use their knowledge of their own world against an enemy that did not understand. Why certain rivers flooded. Why certain mountains were dangerous. Why certain forests seemed to swallow Threskin patrols whole, and they had learned something else. In the ruins of a laboratory in a nation called Japan, human scientists were studying captured Threskin equipment. They did not have the tools to replicate it. They did not have the resources to match it. But they were learning how it worked. In a bunker beneath the Swiss Alps, engineers were designing new weapons. Crude things by Threskin standards. Rough and ugly and unreliable, but capable of punching through Threskin armor. Capable of bringing down Threskin aircraft. Capable of killing in cities across the world. Hackers and programmers were probing the Threscon communication networks, finding weaknesses, exploiting gaps, spreading false intelligence that sent Threskin patrols into ambushes. The humans were losing. That was still true. They were dying by the millions. Their civilization was crumbling. Their world was burning, but they were learning, and the Threskin, for all their centuries of conquest, had never faced an enemy that learned so fast. Ambassador Velik watched the latest battle reports and felt something strange stirring in his crystalline heart. It took him a moment to recognize the emotion. It was hope. He did not know if the humans could win. The odds were still against them. The Threskin were still stronger, still more advanced, still more numerous. But the humans were not fighting like a species that expected to lose. They were fighting like a species that refused to accept defeat. And that, Velik realized, made all the difference. Keep recording, he told his assistant. Every moment, every battle, every death. The galaxy needs to see this. Why? The Kirashi asked. Velik's form pulsed with something between fear and admiration. Because either we are watching the extinction of a remarkable species, or we are watching the birth of something the galaxy has never seen before. In either way, the universe will never be the same. 3 months into the occupation, High War Master Dreketh received a report that made his eye-core run cold. He read it 3 times. Certain there had been some mistake, then he summoned his advisors and made them read it. Then he had the intelligence officers who had prepared it brought before him. He made them swear on their honor that the numbers were accurate. They were Threskin. Casualties, 1.2 million soldiers dead. Another 800,000 wounded badly enough to require evacuation. 47 warships lost to human attacks, not in orbital battles. In attacks from the surface, nuclear weapons strapped to cargo planes, merchant vessels filled with explosives sailing into harbors where Threskin ships were docked. A civilian space launch that had been secretly loaded with kinetic impactors. Metal rods that fell from orbit like the fists of angry gods. The Threskin had lost more soldiers in 3 months on Earth than they had lost in their last 5 conquests combined. But that was not what frightened Dreketh. What frightened him was the second part of the report. The humans had learned to build plasma weapons. Crude things, barely functional, prone to exploding in the hands of their users. But they worked. Threskin armor, which had been nearly invulnerable to human weapons at the start of the invasion, was now being penetrated regularly. The humans had cracked the principles behind Threskin's shield technology. They could not replicate it yet, but they had found ways to disrupt it. Threscan soldiers who had once walked through human gunfire without fear now had to worry about sudden failures in their protective fields. The humans had infiltrated the occupation's communication network. They were feeding false intelligence to field commanders. Threskin patrols were walking into ambushes because they had been told the areas were clear. Supply convoys were being destroyed because their routes had been leaked. And worst of all, the humans were united. Dreketh stared at the intelligence reports, showing cooperation between human nations that had been bitter enemies for generations. The United States was sharing military technology with China. Russia was coordinating operations with NATO. Israel and Iran had formed a joint resistance cell. Pakistan and India were fighting side by side. They are not supposed to cooperate. Dreketh snarled at his advisors. Your intelligence said they were tribal, divided, incapable of unified action. You told me their hatred for each other would make conquest simple. His intelligence chief, a scarred veteran named Morvik, stood his ground despite the War Master's fury. They were divided, War Master. Our intelligence was accurate, but we made a mistake in our analysis. What mistake? Morvik's voice was quiet. We gave them something they hated more than each other. The silence in the chamber was absolute. Dreketh dismissed his advisors and sat alone in his command center. Staring at the holographic map of Earth, red zones showed areas under Threskin control. Blue zones showed areas of active human resistance. Green zones showed areas that had been pacified, where the human population had accepted occupation. 3 months ago, the map had been mostly red with scattered spots of blue. Now it was a chaotic mixture of all three colors, shifting constantly as humans retook territory and Threskin forces pushed them back. The green zones were the smallest, and they were shrinking. Dreketh made his decision. He ordered a full orbital bombardment. If the humans could not be conquered, they would be sterilized. Every major population center would be destroyed from orbit. The planet would be stripped of its intelligent life and colonized by Threskin settlers. It was brutal. It was wasteful, but it would end this nightmare. The order went out to every ship in the fleet. 3 captains refused. Dreketh was so shocked that he could not speak for several seconds. Threskin officers did not refuse orders. It simply did not happen. The chain of command was absolute. Disobedience meant death. And yet Captain Threll, of the Crushing Tide, submitted his resignation and requested immediate return to the homeworld. In his message, he wrote that he had watched the recordings of human resistance. He had seen what they were willing to sacrifice. He had read the reports of how they treated Threskin prisoners. They give them medical care, he wrote. They feed them. They shelter them. We came to exterminate their species, and when they capture our soldiers, they ask if they are hungry. I do not understand these creatures. I do not wish to understand them, but I will not be the one to end them. Captain Vreka of the Iron Mandate was more direct. He simply transmitted a single line. I joined the military to conquer the weak. The humans are not weak. Find someone else to glass their world. Captain Soren of the Endless Hunger said nothing at all. She simply pointed her ship away from Earth and engaged her engines. Dreketh had all 3 captains branded as traitors. He ordered their execution if they were ever captured. He promoted loyal officers to replace them. But the damage was done. Word spread through the fleet, through the ground forces, through the entire Threskin military. 3 captains had looked at humanity and decided that victory was not worth the price. That night, the first Threskin soldier surrendered to human forces. His name was Keth. He was a young soldier, barely old enough to carry a weapon. He had been part of a patrol in the ruins of London when he got separated from his unit. He wandered through the rubble for hours, certain that any human who found him would kill him slowly. Instead, a human woman found him. She was old, her hair gray, her face lined with age and grief. She had lost her family in the initial bombardment. She had every reason to hate him. She gave him water. She bandaged a wound on his arm. She asked him his name. Keth did not understand. He asked her why she was helping him, why she was not killing him, why she was treating him like a person instead of an enemy. The old woman smiled. It was a sad smile, tired and worn. "Because if I become like you," she said, "then you have already won." Keth surrendered that night. He told the human military everything he knew about Threskin positions, Threskin strategies, Threskin weaknesses. He expected to be tortured, to be forced to betray his people. Instead, they simply asked him questions and wrote down his answers. When they were finished, they gave him a bed. They gave him food. They gave him a choice. "You can stay with us," the human commander said, "or you can go back to your people. We will not stop you." Keth stayed. A week later, a dozen more Threscon surrendered. Then 100. Then 1,000. They did not defect because they were cowards. They did not defect because they feared death. They defected because they had seen something in humanity that they had never seen in any other conquered species. They had seen mercy, and mercy, they realized, was more terrifying than any weapon. High War Master Draketh stared at the defection reports and felt his world crumbling. He was not losing to human technology. He was not losing to human tactics. He was losing to an idea. The idea that conquest was not inevitable. The idea that enemies could become allies. The idea that the cycle of violence could be broken. It was an idea that had now infected his own troops. For the first time in his long career, Draketh understood that he was not fighting a species. He was fighting something far more dangerous. He was fighting hope. 1 year after the invasion began, Ambassador Velek Soren stood before the full assembly of the Galactic Concord. Representatives from 300 species filled the vast chamber, their bodies ranging from crystalline forms like Velek's own 2 massive stone creatures that had to be suspended in anti-gravity fields. They had come from every corner of the galaxy, drawn by rumors of what had happened on a small blue planet in an unremarkable solar system. Behind Velek, a holographic display showed Earth. The planet was scarred. Entire regions were still burning. Cities that had stood for centuries were rubble. The marks of orbital bombardment were visible from space, but lights still shone on the night side. Ships still moved in the oceans. And in the ruins of what had been the world's great capitals, humans were already rebuilding. "The Threskin Empire requested our intervention 6 months ago," Velek announced, his crystalline form pulsing with steady light. "They asked us to negotiate a ceasefire. Not because they were losing. By conventional measures, they had one. They controlled Earth's orbit. They had superior technology, superior numbers, superior firepower." He paused, letting the silence build. "They asked for our help because they were afraid." A murmur ran through the assembly. The Threskin afraid. The Threskin who had conquered 47 species. The Threskin whose very name meant terror in a dozen languages. "I stood before the Threskin War Council 1 year ago," Velek continued. "I warned them that invading Earth was insane. I showed them the evidence of human resilience. I begged them to choose another target. They laughed at me. They called me a coward. They said humans were primitive savages who would kneel within a solar cycle." The holographic display shifted. It showed Threskin soldiers laying down their weapons, walking toward human lines with their claws raised in surrender, being greeted not with violence, but with food and medical care. The Threskin did not lose to human technology. Their weapons were superior in every way. They did not lose to human numbers. They killed 10 humans for every soldier they lost. They did not lose to human strategy. The humans made terrible mistakes, wasted lives, failed to coordinate. Velek turned to face the assembly directly, lost to human will. They lost because the humans refused to accept defeat. They lost because every time the Threskin won a battle, the humans learned something. They lost because humans would rather die fighting than live as slaves. He gestured, and the display showed something new. Ships. Human ships. They were crude things, ugly and asymmetrical, built from salvaged Threskin technology and human engineering. They had none of the elegance of Concord vessels. They looked like they had been assembled by children playing with broken toys. But they worked. and there were hundreds of them. "The humans have built a fleet," Velik said. "In 1 year, starting from nothing, they have gone from a species that had never left their own moon to a species capable of challenging Threskin warships. Their vessels are primitive. Their weapons are unreliable. Their tactics are improvised." His form pulsed with something between fear and admiration. "They do not care. They are coming anyway." The assembly erupted in noise. Species that had not spoken to each other in centuries were suddenly shouting over each other, demanding answers, demanding explanations, demanding to know how this was possible. Velik waited for the chaos to subside. "The Threskin have withdrawn from Earth," he said. "They have retreated to their own territory. They have sealed their borders. They are afraid that if they continue the war, the humans will follow them home." He let that sink in. "Earth has formally requested membership in the Galactic Concord. They have agreed to abide by our laws, respect our treaties, and contribute to our collective defense. In return, they ask only one thing." The chamber fell silent. "They ask that we never give another species reason to fear them." A Velthari diplomat rose from her seat. Her species was known for their cold logic, their calculating minds. "You expect us to believe that a species this violent, this aggressive, this dangerous, wants peace?" "I expect you to believe the evidence," Velik replied. "The humans had every reason to seek revenge. The Threskin killed hundreds of millions of their people, destroyed their cities, shattered their world. And when Threskin soldiers surrendered, the humans treated them with kindness." He brought up the final image. A human and a Threskin, standing side by side in the ruins of a city. The human was missing an arm. The Threskin was missing a leg. They were leaning on each other for support. "This image was taken 3 days ago," Velik said. "The human lost his arm, fighting Threskin forces. The Threskin lost his leg in a human ambush. They are helping each other walk to a medical station." The chamber was silent.
"Humans are not peaceful,"
Velik continued. "They are violent and stubborn and utterly insane by any rational standard. They will fight wars over ideas. They will die for symbols. They will sacrifice everything they have for the people they love." His voice softened. "But they are also capable of something that most species in this galaxy have forgotten. They are capable of forgiveness. They are capable of looking at the people who nearly destroyed them and saying, 'Let us try again.'" He turned to the assembly one final time. "Move that we accept Earth's request for membership, because I would rather have humanity as our allies than as our enemies. And after what they did to the Threskin, I suspect every species in this room feels the same way." The vote was unanimous. 20 years later, Velik attended the dedication of the human memorial on the Threskin homeworld. It was built by Threskin hands, funded by Threskin citizens, and dedicated to the millions who had died on both sides of a war that should never have happened. The Threskin were no longer an empire. They were a democracy now, their culture transformed by contact with the species they had tried to destroy. Many of their young people learned human languages, studied human history, adopted human customs. Velik watched a young Threskin child place flowers at the memorial's base. She was small for her species, her carapace still soft and new. She turned to her human guide, a woman who had lost her family in the invasion, and asked a question in broken English. "Why did you forgive us?" The woman knelt down to meet the child's eyes. She was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was gentle. "Because holding on to hate would have destroyed us more completely than your warships ever could. And because we believe everyone deserves the chance to be better than their worst moments." Velik's crystalline form shimmered with warmth. He had spent his entire career trying to understand what made humanity remarkable. Now he knew it was not their capacity for war, though that was formidable. It was not their adaptability, though that was extraordinary. It was not their stubbornness, though that bordered on madness. It was their ability to look at the species that had nearly destroyed them and say, "Let us build something better together." Humanity was insane. Beautifully, wonderfully, impossibly insane. And the galaxy was better for it.